The Halloween week is slowly creeping up on us, and today I have some Halloween special horror stories for you. But before I begin, hit the subscribe button, and let's reach 2,000 subscribers before Halloween begins. And now, let's start with our first story. Back during my time in college, there was an old dormitory that was empty and locked up. The first floor windows were covered with thick black curtains, and the doors had chains and padlocks on them. In my second year of school, I got my EMT certification and started working for the campus EMS squad. That was easily my coolest job ever, and there were perks other students couldn't get, but I got. And one of those perks included having access to keys for everything. So obviously we used those keys to go everywhere. Most places were pretty boring. My now best friend, who was the other EMT I worked with, decided to make the old dorm our hangout place. We would sneak in with friends and drink there on the weekends, or on nights when we didn't have any classes to attend. We usually stayed on the first floor, on just one of the wings of the dorm. The one that was the closest to the back entrance. We didn't stray because the place was dirty and had cobwebs. And they were huge. So one night we were drinking in the one room that we had set up with tables and chairs that we had seized. We were all together. Nobody was missing when somebody very close to our room loudly screamed,
"Who the heck is there?"
To which one of us drunkenly responded,
"Who the heck do you think it is?"
A very confused voice responded back,
"You're not coming with me then, John?"
They sounded like they were walking away from us and towards the center of the building, away from the stairwell. Incidentally, none of us were named John. A few minutes later, we could hear on the floor above us, a very old building floor that was super thick, a rumbling sound that kind of shook the walls. The rumbling stopped right above us with a giant crash. Shit officially just got creepy. We all run up the stairs and make our way to the hallway above the one we were hanging out at. Right at where our room would be on the first floor was a giant filing cabinet on wheels. It was just there. Nobody else was there. You could see the wheel tracks on the floor because it was dusty as shit. But there were no other footprints visible anywhere around, besides our own. We all fucking bolted without getting our stuff. No stopping to get our booze, or turning off our radio, or turning off our battery-powered lantern. So we obviously have to back and get our shit. We waited a few days. A friend of mine and I went one evening to go get it. First, we go to the window and see if we can see our stuff in there. My friend looks in. I didn't. He said he thought he saw somebody in the doorway. I thought he was acting retarded because of what happened the other night. We sneak in and make it to the room and get our shit. Somewhere down and towards the center of the building we hear a door shut. It's completely dark that way. We hear a door closer open, and we don't wait to find out what the hell that's about. So I'm not a person who believes in supernatural stuff, and the same goes for my friends. We decide that we need to figure out what the hell is going on with this building. So about 6 of us devise a pretty easy plan to go about with. We circle the building one night and check all the doors and windows, just to make sure that they were all locked up. Then we went to our usual entrance. We left 2 people on the inside of it to make sure nobody came in or out. Then the rest started going from dorm room to dorm room, checking to make sure nobody else was there. We'd go shout,
"Hello?"
and obviously get no response. We make it through our hallway where we would usually hang out, and our tensions ease up. One of the people at the outside door moves up to where we stopped, and we go to the second floor where the filing cabinet was. Because it's back at the original place, with the wheel tracks and no damn footprints. Tension in the group rise. We start doing the whole
"Hello?"
and no response thing again. We get about halfway through the hall, and one of us gets the idea of saying,
"Oh, come on! It's your friend, Johnny!"
Suddenly we hear a giant thud below us. We also hear muffled screams from the 2 we left below as lookouts, probably saying something along the lines of,
"What the heck was that?"
Then we hear a giant thud behind us on the same floor. Now, this is where nobody could have been, because we went through those rooms, and we would have easily noticed somebody else slamming a door right behind us. It turns into a race to get back out the way we came. We ran past the doors that were just slammed. As we get into our hallway, we can hear doors opening and closing in a way that felt like something was coming toward us from the center of the building again. We get a few hundred yards away before we all stop running and make sure we all made it. We found another place to hang out after that. I don't think either of us even dared to hang out anywhere close to that dorm. The current day, the dorm has been torn down and a real dorm is built over it. So far, I haven't heard any horror stories. Although I forgot to mention something else. We never put it together that this was never a dorm, even though the hallways were really wide. And some of the rooms would have windows next to the doors like an office usually does. That was the type of room we hung out in, because it was a bigger room. Well, once in a while we would notice that the window would get foggy, like when you breathe on a window. But it was always on the hallway side of the window. Like if somebody was looking at us through the glass and watching us. We never put that together until after the whole fleeing in a terror incident. There were hints all along. We didn't care to notice. But in the end, we are alive and safe. To begin with, my mom remarried about 2 years ago. My dad died when I was 12, so she had been widowed for over 10 years. This new relationship was very whirlwind with them meeting, dating, and getting married within 3 months. I didn't know much about the guy, but my mom was happy, so I just tried to be supportive. She moved into his house in upstate Virginia and invited my fiancé and me to spend a weekend in her new home getting to know her new husband. My mom's new home was pretty isolated. It sat on a few hundred acres of lovely rolling hills and was very picturesque. I was nervous about getting to know this guy, but really trying to make the most of it. Over the course of our first day there though, I felt more and more uneasy. I didn't think it was weird, just silly. My mom's new husband was being very welcoming and friendly. We were being made to feel very at home, yet I still couldn't shake this oppressive feeling. I finally chalked it up to me being more upset about my mom getting remarried than I was willing to admit to myself. We spent most of the day wandering around outside since I felt worse when indoors. That night my fiancé and I showered together. When I turned my back to him, he stopped talking mid-sentence and asked,
What did you do to your back?
Well, nothing. Why?
You have a large bruise.
I hopped out to try and see it in the mirror. I got back in and we finished showering in silence. Then it was off to bed. The one window in our room looked out over a pitch-black empty field, but I couldn't sleep until I hung something over the window. I felt sure that otherwise, someone would watch us through the window. The next morning I had a complete meltdown. I woke up and just couldn't stop crying. I told my fiancé that we had to leave. He tried to calm me down by telling me all the things I had been telling myself. My feelings of anxiety were just a result of seeing my mom with someone. The longer I spent with them, the easier it would become. But I just had to leave. It was only Saturday morning and we were supposed to stay until Monday, but I felt completely hysterical. I knew I was on the verge of a panic attack, and my only concrete thought was that I had to stop crying long enough to make our excuses and get the hell out. We did. As soon as we were on the road, I felt like a weight had been lifted. I was even feeling embarrassed for my behavior, hoping I hadn't insulted my mom's husband by leaving early. Then my fiancé broke the silence.
That bruise on your back. Did you get a good look at it?
I had. It looked like some had touched the middle of the back, with fingers spread wide, with their hand at a tilt. I want to make it completely clear, no one had touched my back the previous day, especially hard enough to bruise me. Cut to 3 weeks later. My mom comes to visit me. The entire time she's hounding me to come stay with her again. After finally trying to change the subject for the 5th time, I level with her. Before I've even finished telling the story, her face is white as a sheet. She tells me she has been feeling the same way in the house. She hates it. She wants them to move as soon as possible. And the real kicker is that her new husband's previous wife shot and killed herself right outside in the same field our room window overlooked. I'm not the overly adventurous type, but a friend of mine is, and he told me a chilling story a few years ago. He and a few of his friends went to an abandoned mental hospital in our city. They like to explore abandoned buildings all the time. So it's late one night, and there's a field of tall grass leading up to the building. There are obviously no lights on in the building, and there's just a creepy aura about it. Two of the big black dudes that had come with them stopped at the door and actually refused to go in. After a few minutes of discussion, they both decided to stay at the door and wait for the others, who were going to enter the building and explore it. The windows were all closed shut, and by shut I mean nailed shut, as if they did not want anyone inside to escape. The whole vibe of this place was eerie. So they go down the halls, floor by floor, and there's nothing in any of the rooms, but there is crazed, mindless writing all over the walls in many of them. They finally make it to the top floor, and it's nothing but a long, pitch-black hallway with a door at the end of it. They walk down the hall, and being the crazy adventurers they are, they decide to see what's inside. However, it's the only door in the building that's locked. Multiple guys pound and kick at the door to try and break it open, but it won't budge. One guy shines a flashlight through the keyhole or some sort of hole in the door to see what's inside. Nothing, except more crazed writing on the walls that was visible only by the faint light. After failing once again to break the door down, they give up and walk back down the hall. When they get to the end, at the stairwell, they hear the door fling open and slam the wall. It's still pitch black, and the only thing they can see is a huge, shadowy figure in the doorway. Then they hear thumping, slow at first, but the pace quickens. The figure is running towards them. They sprint down the stairs faster than they've ever run before, and all the while they hear just a few flights above them, thumping sounds. They make it to the first floor and burst out the door where the two guys were waiting outside. They tell them to run, and they all sprint to their van, get in, and pull away. They look out the window and see that huge, dark figure still chasing them. I've tried to remember the story the best I could. I don't think my friend is a liar, so I always believed him. I just always thought it was a cool story. Trust me. This is a 100% true story, even though most people I tell this to in real life never believe me. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood, and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had had enough of my tantrums and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door, he unlocked it, swung it open, and said,
See, there's nothing there.
And paused. To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on my dad's face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with the knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing, and she said,
Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me.
My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed the knife, and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. I forgot to mention one detail. Not that it mattered, but after she left, my dad called and warned my crazy uncle who lived next door. He told him what was happening. Apparently, he was waiting on his front porch with his shotgun when she walked by. He pointed it at her and just said,
Keep moving, bitch!
and she did not even dare to bother him. When I was younger, we frequently visited my grandparents around holidays, even though we didn't live in the same town. My aunt lived 2 houses down from my grandparents. The lady in the house between was creepy. She was a large woman, over 6 feet. She wore logging chains around her neck, a dress, and work boots. The only time I remember seeing her outside was either in her garden in the back or when she was washing the outside of her house. She used to be scrubbing the actual building. She did this often. During these times, she would yell at us kids and call us all kinds of things. She would tell us the devil would be coming for us. The adults told us to leave her alone and to avoid her. We would run the distance between my aunt's house and my grandparents' house because when you passed by, she was watching out the windows. It was creepy and we never went alone. One Halloween night, one of the cousins dared us to go trick or treating at her house. I remember how scared I was, but I didn't want to be called a chicken. Plus, I was going with the group. One of us rang the doorbell, and suddenly there were a lot of banging noises in the house, like doors slamming shut. When she answered the door, she had a severed head in her hands, and we all went screaming. The adults told us it was a Halloween prop, and we knew we shouldn't be bothering her and deserved to be scared. About a month later, my parents got a phone call that the lady had tried to kill my aunt while she was bringing in groceries and had my young cousin in her arms. The lady had one of them rope saws and had come up behind my aunt with it. She put it over her head and around her neck and proceeded to saw. My aunt naturally flipped and started kicking the door. My uncle came and beat the lady down with a fire poker. The police investigation revealed that the woman had been digging tunnels under her home, which were coming up under my aunt's, my grandparents', and another neighbor's house. She had been bringing the dirt up and putting it in the raised beds of the gardens. She also had a shrine of some sort underground, which had a few severed heads around it. My aunt survived that freak incident, but still has a long scar across her neck. When I was a freshman in college, I was on a film shoot near Barstow on Route 66. We were shooting on the property of the cafe known for the film Baghdad Cafe. This property has an abandoned motel attached to it, which is where we were shooting this unbelievably bad horror film. The motel's floor was full of papers, something I initially figured was a relic from the past, while the motel was actually doing business. A while into the shoot, we started picking up the papers and reading them. They were handwritten letters from the 70s, perhaps never sent. They were addressed to dozens of different people, starting out normal, but going on to describe some really fucked up things. This was a guy who literally had some demons. He kept talking about how demons were watching him and the like. The handwriting also got more and more messed up as we assembled the letters chronologically. Meanwhile, outside the motel, there was a storage container with "Keep Out" spray painted on it. Naturally, we were curious. There was a hole in the side, and someone reached in and pulled out some documents. Among them was a letter, in government typeface, telling the person who wrote those crazy letters that he was, unknowingly, a participant in some tests of hallucinogenic substances while he was in the army. This whole time, there was a room in the abandoned motel that was sealed off, and we were strictly forbidden from entering. All the windows were covered by plywood, and the door was barricaded shut. It smelled like death. Seriously, the worst smell I've ever encountered in my life. We did have the curiosity to explore, but the stench kept us away. One of the letters also had a creepy prediction of a person's future. The entire place was shady, and we eventually shot the film somewhere else.